I'm Cassandra Collins, 32 years old, and I built my restaurant empire completely from scratch after my own family pushed me out. My brother Derek never believed I would amount to anything. Thinking my success might finally earn their respect, I walked into our annual family reunion last month full of hope. I was wrong. Derek looked me straight in the eye, smirked, and said those words I will never forget. "This table's for family only." Little did he know that everything between us would change forever that night. Before I tell you how I handled that situation, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and hit that like and subscribe button. If you've ever had to stand up to family who underestimated you, you need to know our history to understand what happened that night. Growing up, our family dynamic always seemed normal to me. My parents, Elizabeth and Robert Collins, raised Derek and me in a middle-class Chicago suburb. Dad owned a restaurant named Collins Family Kitchen that served upscale comfort food. It wasn't fancy, but it had a loyal clientele and a strong reputation for quality. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family. Dad had built the business from nothing. Mom supported him while teaching part-time, and we kids were being groomed to take over eventually. But beneath that picture-perfect surface, things were complicated. Derek was 2 years older than me, and clearly our dad's favorite. When Derek brought home B's on his report card, there was a celebration. When I brought home straight A's, it was simply expected. That pattern repeated throughout our entire childhood. Derek got praise for minimal effort while I worked twice as hard for half the recognition. Despite this, I loved our family restaurant. By age 15, I was working there after school and on weekends. I started as a hostess, then became a waitress, then learned to cook. By 17, I was helping with the books and negotiating with suppliers. The restaurant became my education, my passion, and I thought my future. "You have a gift for this business, Cassie," Dad would say during those rare moments of genuine connection. Those words meant everything to me. Derek, meanwhile, showed up occasionally to charm the customers but had zero interest in the daily operations. He went to parties, played sports, and coasted through school. Yet, Dad always introduced him as the future of Collins Family Kitchen. When college applications came around, I chose business management at a local university so I could keep working at the restaurant. Derek went to a state school 6 hours away on a partial baseball scholarship, rarely coming home except for holidays. During those 4 years, I essentially became Dad's right hand. I modernized our systems, expanded our catering services, and increased profits by 20%. Mom noticed my contributions and advocated for me, but Dad always qualified his praise with, "when Derek graduates and takes over." I expected to finally be made a partner after college. I had the education, the experience, and the passion. Derek had graduated with a communications degree and no clear career path. Yet, when Dad called a family meeting, he announced that while I would be given a manager position, Derek would be groomed for ownership. "Business is about more than just numbers, Cassie," Dad explained. "It's about relationships, and Derek has the personality for it." I was devastated but determined to prove myself. I took the manager role and continued to improve every aspect of the business I could touch. For 2 more years, I poured everything into that restaurant while Derek learned the ropes by occasionally sitting in Dad's office. Then, 3 years ago, Dad had a heart attack. It wasn't severe, but it was a wake-up call. He decided it was time to create a succession plan. I allowed myself to hope that he'd finally seen my value, my dedication. The family gathered in the restaurant after hours. Mom looked nervous. Derek seemed unusually serious. Dad cleared his throat and announced that while the restaurant would technically be left to both of us, Derek would have controlling interest and final say in all decisions. "Cassie, you'll be essential to the day-to-day operations, but Derek will be the face and decision-maker for Collins Family Kitchen." I couldn't speak. 15 years of work, of learning every aspect of the business, of sacrificing my social life, of generating ideas that had made the restaurant more profitable than ever. And I was still just the help. "Dad, this isn't fair," I finally said. "I've earned an equal say at minimum." "This is my decision, Cassandra," he replied firmly. "Derek is the firstborn. That's how family businesses work." That night, I made a decision of my own. I gave my 2 weeks' notice, withdrew my modest savings, and with a small business loan, opened Cassandra's across town. Everyone said I was crazy to compete with my father's established restaurant, especially in the same city. But I knew something they didn't. I understood what made Colin's family kitchen work, and I knew how to make something even better. The first year was brutal. I worked 18-hour days, lived in a tiny apartment, and put every penny back into the business. Derek made sure our family and their friends boycotted my place. Dad wouldn't speak to me, calling my restaurant a betrayal. Only Mom would occasionally sneak in for lunch, always looking over her shoulder. But slowly my restaurant gained a following. I created a menu that honored Dad's classics but with modern twists. I prioritized local ingredients, created a warm atmosphere, and treated my staff like family, real family, where everyone's contributions were valued. By year 2, Cassandra's was breaking even. By year 3, we were profitable and expanding to a second location. Food critics took notice. We won local awards. Meanwhile, I heard through industry contacts that Colin's family kitchen was struggling under Derek's management. Then last month I received a text from Mom. "Your father's health has improved significantly. We're having a family celebration dinner this Saturday at Giovanni's at 7. He wants you there." After 3 years of minimal contact, this felt like an olive branch. Maybe Dad's health scare had shifted his perspective. Maybe my success had earned a new respect. Maybe we could heal what had been broken. I accepted the invitation with a hopeful heart. After all, family is family. And despite everything, I missed them. I wanted to share my success with them, not hold it over them. I wanted reconciliation, not revenge. How naive I was. Giovanni's was one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city, with a 3-month waiting list for reservations. Located in a renovated historic building downtown, it featured soaring ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and white tablecloths so crisp they practically stood at attention. The kind of place where waiters appeared and disappeared like well-dressed ghosts, where wine was presented with a ceremony usually reserved for royal proclamations. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in a navy blue cocktail dress and pearls that had belonged to my grandmother. Conservative enough for family, professional enough to remind them of my success. I'd even brought a gift. A rare bottle of scotch for Dad, the same brand we'd shared the night I turned 21 when he told me I had potential. Standing in the entryway, I smoothed my dress and took a deep breath. This was a new beginning. I'd show them the woman I'd become. Successful but not bitter. Accomplished but still the Cassie they knew. The maitre d' led me into the main dining room with its warm lighting and ambient piano music. I scanned the space, my heart quickening when I spotted them. My family occupied the largest table in the center of the room. Mom, Dad, Derek, our Aunt Patricia and Uncle George, cousins Amanda and Jason, and even my grandmother Alice. They were laughing, raising glasses in a toast I was too late to hear. For a moment I simply watched them. This tableau of family happiness I'd been excluded from for 3 years. Mom spotted me first. Her smile faltered slightly, then returned with what seemed like genuine warmth. "Cassie, you made it," she said, half rising from her chair. The conversation at the table stuttered to a halt. All eyes turned toward me. Aunt Patricia offered a small wave. Uncle George nodded. My cousins looked uncomfortable. I took a step forward, clutching the gift bag with Dad's scotch. "Hi everyone. Sorry if I'm a little late." Dad looked up, his expression unreadable. He'd lost weight since his heart attack. His face was more angular, hair more gray, but his eyes were clear and bright, healthier than I'd seen him in years. "Cassandra," he acknowledged with a nod. I moved toward the empty chair between Mom and grandmother Alice. But before I could reach it, Derek stood up. At 34, my brother had the beginnings of our father's middle-aged spread, and a receding hairline he tried to hide with expensive haircuts. He wore a designer suit that seemed a size too small, as if purchased when he was thinner. "This table's for family only," he said with a smirk, loud enough for nearby diners to hear. "There's a nice little corner table over there." He pointed to a small two-top near the kitchen door. The worst seat in the restaurant. The silence that followed was excruciating. I felt heat rise to my face, my fingers tightening around the gift bag handle. Mom looked mortified. "Derek, don't be ridiculous. Cassie is family." "Is she?" Derek challenged. "Family businesses stick together. Family doesn't compete with family." Grandmother Alice frowned. "Now Derek." "It's fine," I interrupted, forcing my voice to remain steady. "I understand completely. A server approached, sensing the tension. Is everything all right? Would the lady prefer separate seating? Yes, Derek answered before I could speak. She would. I looked around the table. Aunt Patricia studied her menu intently. Uncle George examined his water glass. My cousins exchanged glances. Mom looked torn but remained seated. Dad's face was impassive. Not one of them contradicted Derek. Follow me, ma'am, the server said quietly, her eyes sympathetic. I followed her to the corner table, feeling the stares of other diners. The gift bag suddenly felt heavy in my hand. I set it on the floor beside my chair, out of sight. I'm so sorry about this, the server whispered as she placed a menu before me. Can I bring you something to drink? A glass of Cabernet, please, I replied, proud that my voice didn't waver. From my corner, I could see my family resume their celebration. Laughter bubbled up again. Menus were consulted. Wine was poured. They carried on as if I wasn't there. I sat straight-backed, unfolded my napkin, and placed it in my lap with deliberate movements. I would not flee. I would not make a scene. I would show them a dignity they hadn't shown me. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. He'll come around. Just give him time. 3 years apparently wasn't enough time. And Mom was still enabling his behavior, still choosing peace over fairness. Some things never changed. I ordered a small plate and a salad, foods I could eat while sitting alone without looking pathetic. As I sipped my wine, I watched my family, really watched them from this new vantage point. And for the first time, I began to see patterns I'd been too close to notice before. For 2 excruciating hours, I remained at my isolated table, watching the family dynamic unfold from a distance. It was like viewing a play I'd been part of my whole life, but suddenly seeing it from the audience perspective. The roles were so clear now. Dad as the patriarch, Derek as the golden child, Mom as the peacekeeper, and the extended family as the Greek chorus, following the lead of the main characters. From my corner, I could see Derek commanding attention, gesturing grandly as he told stories that made everyone laugh. He'd always been charismatic. I couldn't deny that. But now, I noticed how he subtly redirected conversations whenever they veered toward topics that might not showcase him favorably. When Aunt Patricia asked about the restaurant business, Derek smoothly transitioned to a funny anecdote about a celebrity who had dined at Colin's family kitchen last month. When Uncle George inquired about finances, Derek deflected with a joke about accountants. He was a master at controlling the narrative. I was transported back to childhood dinner tables where Derek would interrupt my stories about school achievements with tales of his baseball games, how Dad would lean forward, engaged by Derek's adventures, while my academic accomplishments warranted only distracted nods. The pattern was decades old. I just hadn't had the perspective to see it clearly until now. After my appetizer arrived, I decided to make an attempt at joining them. Setting my shoulders, I walked to the main table during a lull in conversation. The crab cakes here are excellent, I offered, standing beside Grandmother Alice. Has anyone tried them? Grandmother smiled up at me. I was just saying I might order those. You should join us, Grandma, Derek interjected before I could respond. No need to move to Cassie's table when there's plenty of family right here. The implication was clear. Grandmother patted my hand apologetically and stayed put. 20 minutes later I tried again, approaching when Mom went to the restroom. I intercepted her on her return. Mom, this is silly. Please ask Derek to stop this. She looked pained. You know how he gets, Cassie. And this is supposed to be a celebration for your father. Let's not create drama. I'm not creating drama. I just want to sit with my family. Give it time. Come by the house tomorrow for coffee. Just you and me. She squeezed my arm and returned to her seat. My third attempt came when Dad got up to speak with the sommelier. I approached him near the wine display. Dad, you're looking well. The color is back in your face. He turned, seeming almost startled to see me. Cassandra. Yes. The doctors say I'm making excellent progress. I'm glad. I was worried about you. A flicker of softness crossed his face. Your mother mentioned you called the hospital. Every day during your surgery and recovery. He nodded, something unreadable in his expression. Then Derek appeared at his elbow. Dad, they have that Bordeaux you love, the 2008 vintage. And just like that, the moment was gone. Dad turned to discuss wine with Derek, and I was forgotten. Back at my corner table, I watched Derek raise his glass in another toast. To Colin's family kitchen, he proclaimed loudly, clearly meant for me to hear. 3 generations of family tradition that continues to thrive because of loyalty and togetherness. Several relatives glanced uncomfortably in my direction, but no one contradicted him. The truth was, according to my industry contacts, the restaurant wasn't thriving at all. Under Derek's management, quality had slipped, staff turnover had increased, and revenues were down. But appearances were everything to my brother, and he maintained the facade flawlessly. My phone vibrated with a notification. Lisa, my manager at Cassandra's, was texting. Great news. Food and Wine confirmed we're in their top new restaurants issue next month. I stared at the message, a complex emotion washing over me. This recognition was what we'd been working toward. A validation that would put us on the national culinary map. Any other night, I would be ecstatic, calling my team, opening champagne. Tonight, the achievement felt hollow without family to share it with. Yet, simultaneously, it was proof that I'd been right to believe in myself when no one else had. I looked up to see cousin Amanda approaching my table. She sat down quickly, glancing back at the main table. I can only stay a minute, she said. But I wanted to say congratulations. I had dinner at your restaurant last month. Didn't tell anyone in the family, of course, but it was amazing. Thank you, I replied, genuinely touched. That means a lot. Derek's being a jerk, she whispered. But you know how Uncle Robert is about him. Nobody wants to make waves. I understand. Amanda squeezed my hand. For what it's worth, I think what you've built is incredible. Before I could respond, Derek's voice carried across the restaurant. Amanda, we're ordering dessert. Your favorite chocolate thing is on the menu. Amanda gave me an apologetic look and hurried back. I checked my watch. Nearly 9:30. I'd endured enough humiliation for one evening. I'd make a dignified exit after dessert, drive home, and celebrate my magazine feature with a bubble bath and the expensive champagne I'd been saving for a special occasion. As I signaled for my check, I overheard Derek's voice, louder than necessary. The distributor problem is temporary, Dad. Nothing to worry about. Just a cash flow issue until the quarter ends. My ears perked up. Distributor problems were serious in the restaurant business. If suppliers weren't getting paid, it indicated deeper financial troubles than mere cash flow issues. 3 extensions already, Derek, Dad replied, his voice lower, but still audible to me. Madison said they're threatening to stop deliveries. Madison worries too much. That's why she's an accountant and I'm the owner. I'm handling it. Madison had been the Collins family kitchen accountant for 20 years. If she was concerned, the situation was dire. Perhaps we should consider a small business loan, Dad suggested. Absolutely not, Derek replied sharply. Collins family kitchen has never taken on debt, and we won't start now. It would look like failure. Then what's your solution? Dad pressed. I told you I'm handling it. Trust me. The conversation shifted as dessert arrived, but the revelation lingered in my mind. The family business was in trouble, more serious trouble than I'd realized, and Derek was hiding it from Dad, who was still recovering from heart surgery. As I contemplated this, a server approached my table. Not my usual server, but the floor manager. Miss Collins, he said quietly, I've been asked to bring you this. He handed me a leather folder. Inside was the bill for the entire family's dinner, all 10 people, including multiple bottles of expensive wine. The total came to just over $2,000. I looked up in shock. The manager appeared uncomfortable. There must be a mistake, I said. The gentleman at the main table insisted the entire bill be brought to you, he explained apologetically. He said, and I quote, since she wants to be part of the family so badly, she can pick up the family tab. I looked over at Derek, who raised his glass to me with a smirk that made his meaning crystal clear. Pay up or look bad in front of everyone. It was the final insult in an evening full of them. But as I stared at that astronomical bill, something shifted inside me. A lifetime of seeking approval, of hoping for recognition, of making myself smaller to keep the peace, all crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. I was done playing by their rules. I looked at the bill in front of me, $2,347, and then at my brother's smug face across the restaurant. This was meant to be the final humiliation, the coup de grace that would send me running from Giovanni's in tears, confirming to everyone present that I couldn't handle the responsibilities of family, that I was the petulant child Derek had always painted me to be. For a brief moment I considered just paying it and leaving. It would be the easiest path, the one with least resistance. I could afford it. My restaurant was doing well enough that $2,000 wouldn't break me. I could write it off as the price of a valuable lesson, that some family bonds weren't worth salvaging. But something deeper stirred within me. This wasn't just about a dinner bill. This was about 3 decades of being diminished, overlooked, and undervalued. About having my contributions ignored and my potential dismissed. About watching someone less qualified and less committed be handed everything I'd worked for simply because he was born first and male. And now that same person was deliberately trying to hurt me, using money as a weapon, certain I would either cause a scene or slink away defeated. Either way, in his mind I would lose. The server hovered awkwardly. "Miss Collins, would you like me to split the bill or—" "No," I said calmly, reaching for my purse. "That won't be necessary." I pulled out my corporate credit card, the one with Cassandra's Restaurant Group, embossed in silver letters. 3 years ago, I couldn't have imagined having a corporate card. Now I had 15 employees depending on me, a second location under construction, and apparently a feature in Food and Wine magazine coming next month. As I handed the card to the server, I noticed movement at the main table. The family was preparing to leave, gathering purses and jackets. Perfect timing. "Could you hold on to that for just a moment?" I asked the server. "I need to speak with my family before they go." He nodded, seeming relieved that I wasn't making a scene about the bill. Standing up, I smoothed my dress and walked deliberately toward the main table. The restaurant had quieted somewhat as the evening crowd thinned, making my approach more noticeable. Several family members spotted me coming, and their conversations faltered. Derek saw their reactions and turned. The smirk remained fixed on his face, clearly expecting me to confront him about the bill, to give him the opportunity to embarrass me further. Instead, I smiled pleasantly. I was just settling up our bill. I wouldn't want to keep everyone waiting. Confusion flickered across Derek's face. This wasn't the reaction he'd anticipated. "That's very generous of you, Cassandra," Dad said, seeming genuinely surprised and perhaps a little impressed. "Not at all," I replied. "Family takes care of family. Isn't that right, Derek?" Before Derek could respond, the main entrance doors opened and a man in his 60s with salt and pepper hair entered. His presence immediately commanded attention. He moved with the confident air of someone accustomed to respect. Dad stood up. "Thomas, I didn't think you could make it." The newcomer approached our table, and I realized this must be Dad's oldest friend, Thomas Garrett. He owned 3 successful restaurants in neighboring states and had been something of a mentor to Dad in the early days of Colin's family kitchen. "Robert, my friend, sorry I'm late. Traffic from the airport was terrible," Thomas said, embracing my father. "Elizabeth, lovely as always," he added, kissing my mother's cheek. His eyes found me standing at the edge of the family circle. "And this must be Cassandra. I've heard so much about your new place." I extended my hand, surprised. "You have?" "Indeed. The industry buzz is considerable. Innovative while respecting tradition. Not an easy balance to strike." He shook my hand warmly. "I'm looking forward to trying it while I'm in town." Dad looked between us, clearly not expecting this connection. Derek's expression had soured completely. "Mr. Garrett, it's an honor to meet you," I said. "Your Riverside Grill was actually an inspiration for some of my seasonal menu approaches." "Call me Thomas, please," he insisted. "And I'd love to hear more about your concept. Perhaps I could stop by tomorrow." "We'd be delighted to host you," I replied, feeling a small surge of vindication at having my work recognized by someone my father respected. Derek stepped forward, inserting himself into the conversation. "Thomas, you'll have to visit the original Collins establishment first, of course. We've made some exciting changes recently." "Both then," Thomas said diplomatically. "I'm in town for 3 days." He turned back to Dad. "Robert, you didn't tell me your daughter had such an entrepreneurial spirit." Must run in the family. An awkward silence fell over the group. Dad cleared his throat, but seemed unsure how to respond. Actually, I said into the silence, I just received some news I was hoping to share with the family tonight. I pulled out my phone and showed the text from my manager. Food and Wine is featuring Cassandra's in next month's top new restaurants issue. Several gasps and murmurs rippled through the family. Mom's face broke into a genuine smile. Cassie, that's wonderful. Congratulations, Thomas said, clearly impressed. That's significant recognition, especially for such a young establishment. I could feel Derek seething beside me, but for once he couldn't control the narrative. The accomplishment spoke for itself. Dad studied me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Pride mingled with something else. Regret perhaps, or simply surprise. Well done, Cassandra, he said finally, his voice gruff but sincere. For a moment I felt like that little girl again, desperate for his approval. But the feeling passed quickly. I didn't need his validation anymore, though it was nice to receive it. The server approached with my credit card and the receipt. Miss Collins, everything is taken care of. Derek stared at the leather folder. You actually paid that bill. Of course, I replied calmly. I can afford it. Thomas looked confused. Am I missing something? Mom quickly intervened. Nothing important. Family silliness. She linked her arm through Thomas's. Tell me about your trip. Are Jenny and the kids well? As she deftly steered him toward the exit, the rest of the family began to follow. Dad lingered, looking between Derek and me as if trying to decide something. Dad, we should go, Derek said tightly. You shouldn't overexert yourself. Dad nodded slowly. Yes, I suppose we should. He turned to me. Cassandra, thank you for coming tonight. It wasn't much, but it was something. An acknowledgement I hadn't expected. As they walked away, Derek fell back to walk beside me, speaking low so only I could hear. Don't think this changes anything. You're still not part of this family business. I stopped walking, letting the others move ahead out of earshot. Derek, I need to tell you something important, I said quietly. He rolled his eyes but paused. What? I know about the distributor problems. I know the restaurant is in financial trouble. His face paled slightly. You don't know what you're talking about. Madison is worried enough to risk telling Dad, even with his heart condition. That means it's serious. Stay out of our business, he hissed. You lost the right to know anything when you opened your competing restaurant. That's just it, Derek. I don't see Cassandra's as competing with Colin's family kitchen. There's room in this city for both of us to succeed. I paused, making sure he was really listening. But only if both restaurants are well managed. His eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm willing to help if you're willing to accept it. Not for your sake, but for Dad's sake. For the legacy he built. For a moment, vulnerability flashed across Derek's face so quickly I almost missed it. Then the hardness returned. We don't need your help, he said. And Dad would never accept it anyway. With that, he turned and strode toward the exit where the family was gathering. I remained where I was, watching them through the windows as they said their goodbyes in the parking lot, separated from them by more than just glass. The evening had been painful, yes, but it had also been clarifying. For years, I'd been fighting for a place at a table that had never truly welcomed me. Perhaps it was time to stop seeking a seat and realize I'd already built my own table. One where everyone was valued for their contributions, where success was shared, and where no one was relegated to a corner. As I watched my family drive away, I felt something unexpected. Not anger or hurt, but a strange sense of freedom. The bill that was meant to humiliate me had instead become the catalyst for my liberation. I turned to leave and nearly bumped into Thomas Garrett, who had apparently come back inside. Cassandra, he said thoughtfully, I couldn't help but overhear part of your conversation with your brother. Is Colin's family kitchen really in trouble? I hesitated, torn between family loyalty and honesty. It's not my place to say. He nodded understandingly. Family businesses can be complicated. Believe me, I know. He handed me his business card. Call me tomorrow. I'd like to hear more about your restaurant and perhaps discuss a few other matters as well. As he walked away, I stared at the card in my hand, a plan already forming in my mind. Derek might have rejected my help directly, But there were other ways to save a family legacy. I tucked the card into my purse and walked out into the cool night air, feeling for the first time in years that I was exactly where I needed to be. Not in anyone else's shadow, but standing firmly in my own light. The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The humiliation of the previous night had burned away, leaving behind a steely resolve. I wasn't going to hide in my corner anymore, metaphorically or literally. I spent the early hours at Cassandra's, going through prep with my staff, ensuring everything would be perfect for Thomas Garrett's visit later that day. Around 11 o'clock, I excused myself to make a phone call from my office. "Mr. Garrett, it's Cassandra Collins." "Cassandra, please call me Thomas. I'm looking forward to lunch at your establishment today. Actually, I was wondering if we might meet a bit earlier. There's something I'd like to discuss with you privately." He agreed. And 2 hours later, we were seated in my office reviewing the financial statements I'd prepared overnight. Thomas studied them with the sharp eye of someone who'd been in the restaurant business for 40 years. "These projections for a partnership between Cassandra's and Colin's family kitchen are quite impressive," he said finally. "You really think the two businesses could be stronger together?" "I do," I confirmed. "Different markets, different atmospheres, but shared resources, suppliers, and administrative costs. It's efficient and preserves both identities." "And your brother and father would agree to this?" I hesitated. "That's the challenging part. They don't know I'm proposing this yet." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "I need to present them with a complete plan," I explained. "Derek won't listen otherwise. And Dad needs to see that this isn't about my ego but about saving what he built. And if they refuse, then at least I'll know I tried everything possible." Thomas nodded slowly. "I admire your commitment to family despite everything. Not everyone would be so forgiving." "It's not just forgiveness," I admitted. "It's also practical. Colin's family kitchen has a 30-year history and loyal clientele. That's valuable." And I paused, choosing my words carefully. It would break my father's heart to see it fail. After lunch, during which Thomas praised everything from our farm-to-table approach to our staff training, he made me an unexpected offer. "I have some influence with your father. He respects my opinion. If you're ready to present this proposal, I'd be willing to attend as a neutral third party." "You do that. The restaurant industry needs more women leaders like you, Cassandra. And I've known your father long enough to know he's a good man who sometimes lets traditional thinking cloud his judgment." That afternoon, I called my mother and asked her to arrange a meeting with Dad and Derek at the house. I didn't explain why, only that it was important and related to the business. She sounded worried but agreed. At 6 that evening, I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home, Thomas Garrett beside me in the passenger seat. My stomach churned with anxiety, but I reminded myself that I wasn't the same person who had left this house in tears 3 years ago. I was a successful business owner now with a viable plan and an industry heavyweight supporting me. Mom opened the door, surprise registering on her face when she saw Thomas. "Elizabeth," he greeted her warmly. "Hope you don't mind me crashing this family meeting." "Of course not," she replied, though her questioning gaze turned to me. We entered the living room where Dad and Derek were waiting. Both men stood when they saw Thomas. "What's going on here?" Derek demanded, looking between Thomas and me. "Cassandra asked me to join her," Thomas explained calmly. As someone with experience in family restaurant businesses, I was happy to oblige. Dad gestured for us to sit. "I assume this is important." "It is," I confirmed, opening my portfolio. "I'll get right to the point. Colin's family kitchen is in financial trouble. Serious trouble." Derek immediately tensed. "That's none of your—" "Let her finish," Dad interrupted, his expression grave. I slid copies of my proposal across the coffee table. "I've prepared a plan for a partnership between Cassandra's and Colin's family kitchen. Not a merger. Each restaurant would maintain its individual brand and atmosphere, but we would share resources, suppliers, and administrative costs, creating significant savings." "This is ridiculous," Derek scoffed, though he didn't touch the document. "Your sister has put considerable thought into this," Thomas noted. "I've reviewed the numbers myself. It's a solid plan with real potential." Dad picked up the proposal and began to read. his expression unreadable. The structure would be a new parent company, I continued, with equal ownership shares for both Derek and me. Each of us would manage our respective restaurants, but major decisions affecting both establishments would require consensus. Equal shares. Derek laughed bitterly. After you walked out on the family business, after you competed against us for 3 years, after I built a successful restaurant from scratch, I corrected. After I earned a feature in food and wine, after I created a business model that works. While you were off doing that, Derek countered. I was here taking care of Dad's legacy, taking care of Mom and Dad. Were you? I asked quietly. Or were you running that legacy into the ground? Derek's face flushed with anger. You have no idea what you're talking about. I know you've missed 3 payment cycles with premier distributors. I know Madison has been juggling accounts to keep suppliers delivering. I know staff turnover has increased 70% under your management. I kept my voice calm. Factual. These aren't accusations, Derek. These are business realities we need to address before it's too late. Dad looked up sharply. How do you know all this? The restaurant industry talks, Dad. I have relationships with the same suppliers, the same service providers. People respect me because I pay my bills on time and treat my staff well. Derek stood up, pacing angrily. This is a power play. She's using our temporary cash flow issues to try to take over. If I wanted to see Colin's family kitchen fail, I'd do nothing, I pointed out. I'm offering a solution that benefits everyone. Mom, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Derek, is it true? Is the restaurant in that much trouble? Derek looked trapped. It's a difficult period. The economy, the new competition on the north side. Tell them about the tax lien, I interrupted quietly. The room went still. Dad's face paled. What tax lien? Derek shot me a look of pure hatred. There's a small issue with some quarterly payments. A $76,000 issue, I clarified. Filed with the county last month. How could you possibly know that? Derek demanded. Public records, Derek. Anyone can look them up. Dad set down the proposal, his hands shaking slightly. Is this true? Derek's defiance crumbled. I was handling it. I didn't want to worry you during your recovery. By handling it, he means ignoring certified letters and hoping the problem would magically disappear, I said. That's not management, Derek. That's negligence. Cassandra, Mom cautioned, but Dad held up his hand. No, Elizabeth, she's right. He looked at Derek with disappointment. Why didn't you tell me how serious things had become? Because you always taught me that Colin's men handle their problems, Derek replied, a note of desperation in his voice. You said asking for help was a last resort. Not when the business is at stake, Dad said wearily. Not when there's a solution available. So you're taking her side? Derek asked incredulously. After she abandoned the family business, after she competed against us. This isn't about sides, Thomas interjected. It's about preserving Robert's legacy through a pragmatic business decision. Dad turned to me, really looking at me perhaps for the first time in years. You would do this? Partner with the brother who treated you so poorly last night, with the father who overlooked you. I would, I said firmly. Not because I've forgotten or because it didn't hurt, but because Colin's family kitchen matters to me too. It's where I learned to love this business. It's part of who I am, even after everything. A long silence filled the room. Dad looked down at the proposal again, then at Derek, then at me. I need to think about this, he said finally. And I need to see the books, the real numbers, Derek, not whatever sanitized version you've been showing me. Derek looked defeated. Fine, I'll bring everything tomorrow. I stood up. The offer has an expiration date. The tax lien needs to be addressed within 30 days before the authorities can take further action. I need an answer by the end of the week. You're giving us an ultimatum? Derek asked bitterly. I'm giving us a deadline, I corrected. Because that's what responsible business partners do. As Thomas and I prepared to leave, Dad walked us to the door. Mom and Derek remained in the living room, their voices a low murmur of intense conversation. Cassandra, Dad said quietly, regardless of what happens with this proposal, I'm proud of what you've built. I should have said that last night. The words I'd waited decades to hear. Yet now they weren't the validation I needed anymore. They were simply a recognition of reality. "Thank you, Dad," I replied. "But I didn't do it for your approval. I did it because it was the right path for me." Something shifted in his expression. Respect, perhaps, or the recognition that the daughter seeking his blessing had become a woman who stood on her own accomplishments. "We'll be in touch about the proposal," he said as Thomas and I walked to my car. Thomas chuckled. "Remind me never to get on your bad side, Cassandra Collins. That was quite a performance in there." "Not a performance," I corrected. Just the truth finally spoken out loud. Driving away from my childhood home, I felt neither triumph nor anxiety about their decision. I had done what I could. I had offered a lifeline without sacrificing my dignity. I had stood up for myself while still honoring family bonds. The rest was up to them. 3 days later, I was expediting during the dinner rush at Cassandra's when Lisa, my manager, approached the pass. "Your father and brother are here," she said quietly. "They're asking to speak with you." I glanced at the clock. 8:30 on a Friday night, our busiest service. Did they make a reservation? No, but I seated them in your office. Seemed important. I handed off expediting duties to my sous chef and made my way through the bustling kitchen. My restaurant was alive with energy. Servers moving efficiently between tables, cooks calling orders, the satisfying sounds of a successful establishment in full swing. Whatever Dad and Derek wanted to say, they were seeing firsthand what I had built. I paused outside my office door, took a deep breath, and entered. Dad and Derek stood as I walked in. Both looked uncomfortable in the small space dominated by a desk covered in invoices, schedules, and menu drafts. A wall of awards and positive reviews faced them. Visual evidence of everything we'd achieved in 3 years. "Sorry to keep you waiting," I said professionally. "Friday nights are our busiest service." "We can see that," Dad replied, a note of admiration in his voice. "The place is packed." "We have a 90-minute wait for walk-ins," I confirmed. "But I'm sure you didn't come to discuss our occupancy rates." Derek cleared his throat. "We reviewed your proposal thoroughly." I gestured for them to sit, taking my own seat behind the desk. The symbolism wasn't lost on any of us. This was my territory, my business, my success. "And?" I prompted when neither continued. Dad slid a folder across the desk. "We've made some counter-proposals to certain points, but the fundamental structure of the partnership, the equal shares, we're prepared to accept those terms." I stared at them, momentarily speechless. I had expected more resistance, more negotiation, more pride from Derek especially. "What changed your minds?" I asked. "The books don't lie," Dad said grimly. "Once I saw the complete financial picture. It's worse than you knew, actually. Derek's decisions were more problematic than even you realized." Derek flinched but didn't contradict him. "And," Dad continued, "Thomas Garrett called me. Said if I was too stubborn to accept help from the most talented restaurateur he'd met in a decade, who happened to be my daughter, then I deserved to lose my business." A small smile tugged at my lips. Thomas had gone above and beyond. "There are conditions," Derek added quickly. "The partnership is contingent on your help, resolving the tax situation immediately. And we want quarterly review meetings with an independent accountant of our choosing. Not just Madison." "Reasonable terms," I acknowledged, opening the folder to scan their counter-proposals. Most were minor adjustments, timeline modifications, clarifications on operational responsibilities. Nothing that changed the fundamental equal partnership. "You're really willing to do this?" I asked, looking at Derek directly. "To work with me as an equal partner after everything?" For a moment the facade cracked and I saw the fear beneath his arrogance. "I don't have much choice, do I? It's this or watch Dad's legacy disappear." "Our legacy," Dad corrected quietly. "All of ours." An unexpected emotion welled up in me. Not triumph or vindication, but a complicated mixture of relief, hope, and lingering hurt. This wasn't a perfect resolution. There were years of damage that couldn't be undone with a business agreement, but it was a beginning. "I'll need to review these with my lawyer," I said, closing the folder. "But preliminarily, I think we can work with this framework." Dad nodded, then hesitated before speaking again. "There's something else, Cassandra. Something not in the proposal. What's that? An apology, he said, his voice rough with emotion. From both of us. Derek looked down at his hands, clearly uncomfortable, but not contradicting Dad. I was wrong, Dad continued. Wrong to overlook your contributions all those years. Wrong to make decisions based on tradition rather than merit. And wrong to let my own stubbornness keep me from seeing what you were capable of building. The words hung in the air between us. Words I'd never expected to hear. And Derek? I prompted, looking at my brother. He met my gaze reluctantly. The dinner at Giovanni's. That was cruel. And the bill. I was trying to humiliate you because I was jealous. I've been jealous for a long time if I'm honest. Jealous? I echoed in disbelief. You had everything handed to you. And you earned everything you got, he replied. Do you know how that feels? To know deep down that your sister deserves the business more than you do? That she's more capable, more dedicated? It's easier to push you away than face that truth. The admission stunned me. For so long, I'd seen Derek as the golden child, the favored son who had every advantage. I'd never considered that my work ethic, my passion, my abilities might have made him feel inadequate. This partnership won't work if we're carrying old resentments, Dad said. We all need to start fresh. He was right, of course, but forgiveness couldn't be manufactured on demand. Not after years of hurt. I appreciate the apologies, I said carefully. But rebuilding trust will take time. I'm willing to try if you both are. We are, Dad confirmed. A knock at the door interrupted us. Lisa poked her head in. Sorry to interrupt, but Thomas Garrett just arrived with some associates. Says he made arrangements with you. I'd forgotten that Thomas was bringing restaurant critics from Chicago and New York to dinner tonight. A major opportunity I'd been preparing for all week. Tell them I'll be right out, I replied. As Lisa withdrew, I turned back to Dad and Derek. I need to get back to service. Why don't you join us for dinner? See what we've built here. Then tomorrow we can meet with the lawyers to formalize everything. Dad nodded. We'd like that. As we walked through the kitchen toward the dining room, I watched Dad taking in every detail, the organization of the line, the quality of the ingredients, the efficient choreography of the staff. Professional pride showed in his expression, and for the first time in years I felt like his daughter again, not just his disappointment. The dining room was buzzing with energy. Every table filled, servers moving gracefully between them, the warm lighting creating an intimate atmosphere despite the crowd. Thomas waved from a prime table where he sat with 3 people I recognized as influential critics. Impressive, Dad murmured. Very, Derek agreed, and I was surprised by the sincerity in his voice. I guided them to a table I asked Lisa to prepare, not too close to Thomas's group, but still with a good view of the room. Order whatever you like, I told them. I need to greet Thomas and his guests, but I'll check on you later. As I walked away, I glanced back to see Dad already studying the menu with interest, while Derek looked around the restaurant with new eyes, perhaps finally seeing me, really seeing me for the first time. The evening flowed into a strange, surreal experience. I moved between tables, greeting regulars, checking on Thomas and his influential guests, occasionally stopping by Dad and Derek's table. Professional and personal worlds that had been separate for 3 years now colliding in unexpected ways. Near the end of service, as desserts were being served, Mom arrived, having finished her evening shift at the hospital. She joined Dad and Derek, her face registering surprise and pleasure at seeing them relaxed, enjoying the food, engaging with the experience I'd created. When I finally sat down with my family for just a few minutes between duties, Mom reached across the table to squeeze my hand. I should have stood up for you more, she said simply. All those years. Giovanni's. I'm sorry, Cassie. We all made mistakes, I acknowledged. But we're here now. That's what matters. It wasn't a perfect resolution. There were still hurt feelings, still trust to rebuild, still details of the partnership to negotiate. But sitting there in the restaurant I had built from nothing, with my family finally acknowledging my worth, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the possibility of healing. Later that night, after the last customers had left and the staff had gone home, I sat alone in my office reviewing the counter-proposal. The terms were fair. The partnership could work, professionally speaking. But the emotional work of rebuilding family bonds, That would be the greater challenge. My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. Critics impressed. Expect good things. You've created something special here, Cassandra. Don't let family complications diminish that achievement. He was right. Whatever happened with the partnership, whatever evolved with my family relationships, I had built something valuable, something that was entirely mine. That accomplishment couldn't be taken away no matter what. I gathered my things and turned off the lights, walking through the silent, spotless kitchen. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and negotiations, the beginning of a new business relationship with my family. It wouldn't be easy. Old habits and hurts wouldn't disappear overnight. But for the first time in years, I felt like we were all finally sitting at the same table. 6 months passed in a blur of legal meetings, financial restructuring, and careful rebuilding of both business and family relationships. The partnership between Cassandra's and Colin's family kitchen became official, operating under a parent company we named Colin's Heritage Group. The tax lien was resolved, suppliers were paid, and slowly the original family restaurant began to stabilize under our joint management. We kept the restaurants distinct. Colin's family kitchen maintained its traditional comfort food approach, while Cassandra's continued its more contemporary farm-to-table concept. Different markets, different atmospheres, but shared resources and strength. Working with Derek proved challenging as expected. Old dynamics didn't disappear with the signing of legal documents. There were heated arguments over menu changes, staffing decisions, and marketing strategies. More than once, I found myself in Dad's office taking deep breaths to maintain my composure after particularly difficult conversations with my brother. He's trying, Dad would say. It's not easy for him to share control after being in charge, even if he wasn't doing it well. I know, I would acknowledge. I'm trying too. And I was. Each day required conscious effort to separate past hurts from present business decisions, to judge Derek's ideas on their merits rather than through the lens of our history. The food and wine feature was published, bringing national attention to Cassandra's. Reservations became even harder to secure, and tourism boards began including us in their city guides. Thomas Garrett introduced me to his network of industry leaders, opening doors I hadn't even known existed. Dad watched all this with a mixture of pride and regret. One evening, as we reviewed quarterly numbers in his office, he sat down his reading glasses and looked at me directly. I should have seen it earlier, he said quietly. Your potential, your passion for this business. Why didn't you? I asked the question I'd wanted to ask for decades. He sighed, looking suddenly older. Partly tradition. My father left the business to me, his only son, bypassing my sisters. I never questioned that model. He paused. And partly I think I saw too much of myself in you, Cassandra. The same drive, the same attention to detail. Derek needed me more. Or so I thought. You were always so capable, so independent. So you rewarded his dependence and punished my competence, I observed without rancor. I did, he admitted. It wasn't fair or right. I see that now. These conversations, sometimes painful but necessary, became part of our new relationship. Not just father and daughter, not just business partners, but two adults working through decades of misunderstanding. Mom found her voice in this new family dynamic as well. After years of playing peacekeeper at the expense of justice, she began to speak up when old patterns emerged. You're doing it again, Robert, she would say when Dad automatically turned to Derek first in meetings. Or Cassie made that point 5 minutes ago, Derek, when my brother restated my ideas as his own. Small corrections, gentle but persistent, helping all of us break habits formed over 30 years. Derek's journey was perhaps the most surprising. After initial resistance and resentment, he began to engage with the partnership more constructively. He wasn't a natural restaurateur like Dad or me, but he did have strengths: customer relations, front of house management, marketing. I never wanted to admit it, he confessed during a rare moment of vulnerability after a successful joint promotion, but I was drowning trying to run every aspect of the business. It's actually a relief to focus on the parts I'm good at. This admission that he had limitations, that he needed help, represented significant growth for my brother. The Derek of a year ago would never have acknowledged weakness, would have maintained the facade of competence even as the business crumbled around him. My own healing journey wasn't linear. There were days when resentment bubbled up, when a casual remark from Dad or Derek would trigger memories of past hurts. I found a therapist who specialized in family business dynamics, someone who helped me process these feelings without letting them derail the progress we were making. You can acknowledge the pain without being controlled by it, she advised. You can forgive without forgetting. Gradually, I learned to separate my self-worth from my family's validation. The little girl desperate for Dad's approval evolved into a woman who appreciated his recognition, but no longer required it to feel complete. The magazine feature led to other opportunities, guest appearances on cooking shows, speaking engagements at culinary schools, even preliminary discussions about a cookbook. Each achievement reinforced what I had begun to understand the night of that fateful dinner at Giovanni's. My value wasn't determined by my family's perception. 1 year after the partnership formation, we held a private celebration at Cassandra's. The restaurant was closed to the public, filled instead with staff from both establishments, family members, and a few close friends like Thomas Garrett. Dad stood to make a toast, looking healthier and more vibrant than he had in years. To Colin's Heritage Group, he began, raising his glass, and to the two people whose complementary strengths have made it stronger than it ever was under just my leadership. He looked at Derek and me with equal pride, perhaps the first time in our lives he had viewed us that way. I've learned some important lessons this past year, he continued, that sometimes our greatest strengths come from admitting our weaknesses, that family businesses succeed not by clinging to tradition for tradition's sake, but by valuing each member's unique contributions. Mom wiped away a tear. Thomas nodded approvingly. Derek, seated beside me, gave a small, genuine smile. And finally, Dad concluded, that the greatest legacy I could leave isn't a restaurant with my name on it, but children who have the courage to forge their own paths and the wisdom to find their way back to each other. As applause filled the room, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced since childhood. Not because everything was perfect, it wasn't. Derek and I still had moments of tension. Dad occasionally slipped into old habits. The partnership faced ongoing challenges as any business does. But something fundamental had shifted. We were no longer acting out prescribed roles in a family drama. We were adults choosing to work through difficult relationships because they mattered to us. Choosing to see each other clearly with all our strengths and flaws. The true revelation of this journey wasn't that I finally got the seat at the family table I had always wanted. It was realizing that my worth wasn't determined by where I sat or who invited me, or whether the table was even worth sitting at. I had built my own table. I had created my own success. And from that position of strength, I could choose to rebuild family bonds on new, healthier terms. As the celebration continued around me, I thought about that corner table at Giovanni's, intended as a humiliation, but actually the vantage point that allowed me to see the truth. Sometimes being excluded is the catalyst for finding where you truly belong. That night at Giovanni's, when Derek said, "This table is for family only," he thought he was punishing me. Instead, he was setting me free to define family not by blood or tradition, but by respect, recognition, and reciprocal support. The bill he sent to my table, meant to embarrass me, instead became the moment I reclaimed my power. Sometimes the very weapons others use to hurt us become the tools of our liberation. Have you ever had to stand up to family who underestimated you? What did that moment teach you about your own strength? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that their worth isn't determined by a seat at someone else's table. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the most painful rejections lead us exactly where we need to be.